A few years ago, I was in a part of a city that I didn't know very well, and the group I was with didn't know where they were either. So I used an app called Waze all the time when I was driving. It just worked great, works year-round traffic. This was a huge city with lots of traffic, but this particular day, we were on foot. So I went ahead and opened up Google Maps. Google Maps has a pedestrian, a walking, you can maneuver as well, theoretically. So I opened up the Google Maps app, and if you're familiar with the pedestrian view, what happens is you get this little blue dot, right? It's supposed to be where you are. And then it has this cone-shaped blue thing that kind of fades, right? It looks like a funnel or... Well, one of the people in the group, and I don't remember who was in this group. So if this was you, I want to apologize because I'm going to trash you in just a moment. But one of my friends in the group said, the way you need to look at that is the blue dot is like the front of the boat, and that blue funnel is like the wake behind the boat. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So we put the blue dot at the front of the boat, and we took off. We knew, where in the map we needed to get. Well, there's huge buildings all over, and we're wandering around, and I'm looking at this thing going, this is not going well. We are not getting any closer to where we want, and some of you already know what's going on. My friend was exactly wrong. He could not have been wronger. Okay, that's terrible English, but you know exactly what I mean because you've had a friend tell you the exact same thing. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take that blue funnel and you need to go right into the middle of that blue funnel is what you're supposed to be doing. So after a little while, I'm looking, we're getting farther away, like the estimated time of arrival is double what it was when we started, and I'm like, this is, so I had to pull the plug and say, no, we're not going the right way. Let's turn this puppy around and let's try this differently, which raises a great question, I think, and that is, we need to be thinking about who we're following, right? If we're following the wrong advice, then folks, we're going the wrong direction. There's just no way around it. This is one of those situations where intention was worth exactly squat. All of us had the same intention. We all wanted to get to the restaurant. Direction meant everything. What direction we were going, that's what mattered, right? And so we need to be asking this question of ourselves, who am I following? And I actually, tonight, would like you to ask this question quite literally. And I have two different senses that I'd like you to think about. The first one is this: quite literally, who are you following on Spotify? Who are you following on YouTube? Who are you following on Instagram? Who are you following on Snapchat? Some of you are going, nobody. I have no idea. You're like, did you just start speaking Hungarian? What is going on here? Just stick with me. Who are you following? Do some of you know what I'm talking about? Who are you following on Facebook? What news channels are you listening to? Who have you clicked on to say, I want to subscribe to that newsletter, and those emails are coming into your inbox? What radio station comes on in your kitchen when you flip the radio on? Or in your car when you turn the ignition switch or you push the button or whatever you do in your car now to get it to turn on? Who are we listening to? Who are we following? That's one sense. Quite literally, we have news, we have information, we have videos flowing into our devices because of stuff that we've clicked on previously. And every company that I know of is monetizing this. They're making it work. They know what we like, and they're going after us. So who are we following? But the second way is also quite literal, and what I mean by that is this. Who are you following? Who are your coaches right now of your sports team? Who are the leaders of your sports team? Who are you following at work? Who in your family is a leader and you're following that family member? Who among your friends is a leader and you're following that friend? Who are the people in your life? When you think right now, in my life, who are the people that are influencing me? Who are the people that when they speak up, I listen to their advice? Because we make decisions every day on who we're going to follow, don't we? And we just heard, James just offered, if you need help with this upcoming election, we will help answer questions. Do we trust James? Do we? Okay, I'm just throwing this out here. This is the question of the night. Who am I following? And why am I following them? All right, in the passage that we're going to look at tonight, these questions become, they're actually life and death. Is this person or these people that I am following, are they actually leading me in the right direction? Are they worthy of my trust? In the opening illustration, my friend that said, yeah, think of it like a boat, were they leading me in the right direction? Were they leading? No, we wasted tons of time. They were not worthy of my trust in that case. All right? So, I want to invite you to turn to 1 Samuel chapter 14. In the story tonight, our hero, Jonathan's armor bearer, he had the option in this story to choose between one of two leaders, all right? And we're going to see the choice that he made and the outcome that it had on his life. Okay, so 1 Samuel chapter 14, and if you're using one of our church Bibles, you'll find it on page 164. 1 Samuel 14. And I'd really encourage you to read in your own Bibles as I read the text here. Now it starts off, chapter 14, verse 1 of 1 Samuel. Now it happened one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, so this is the opening of a story, okay? Now it happened one day. One day, this is what was going on. This is the story as it unfolds. Now it happened one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Interesting. And Saul was sitting in the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men. Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, was wearing an ephod. But the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. That will come up later in the story of why that's important. Now, here's the description of the geography. Between the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a sharp rock on one side and a sharp rock on the other. And the name of one was Bozez, and the name of other, Seneh. It's pretty cool. They had cliffs. He needed to pass between two cliffs, and these cliffs were so prominent, they actually had names. I don't know if you're from North Carolina or if you've lived in another. We have one hill in Florida, don't we? And we put a tower on top of it. We don't name our rocks normally, do we? I don't know if you have two rocks on the end of your driveway and you've named one and the other. We don't, but they named their rocks here. Okay, so here we go. They had Bozez and Seneh. The front of one faced northward, opposite Michmash, and the other southward, opposite Gibeah. Then Jonathan said to the young man who bore his armor. Okay, now, if you've been drifting already, zero in on verse 6. Zero in on this, all right? Jonathan said to the young man who was his armor bearer, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing restrains the Lord from saving by many or by few." So his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Go then. Here I am with you according to your heart." That's the key verse. We're going to come back to that verse. So Jonathan then said, "Very well. Here's my amazing military strategy, all right? Let us cross over to these men, and we will show ourselves to them. If they say thus to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand still in our place, and we will not go up to them." I'm going to show you a map in just a moment of what this looked like. "But if they say thus, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for the Lord has delivered them into our hand, and this will be a sign to us." So both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines said, "Look, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden." Then the men of the garrison called to Jonathan and his armor-bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will show you something." They couldn't come up with anything better than that. Okay, anyway, all right, we'll get to that in a moment. They're like, "Come on up, we've got something to show you." So Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has delivered them into the hand of Israel." And Jonathan climbed up on his hands and knees. He is literally, physically rock climbing up a cliff face in order to attack an army garrison. All right? We'll get back to that. His armor-bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan. As he came after him, his armor-bearer killed them. That first slaughter with Jonathan and his armor-bearer made was about 20 men within about half an acre of land. And there was trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and the raiders also trembled, and the earth quaked, so that it was a very great trembling. Let's pause and pray before we keep going. Our gracious Father, I openly acknowledge to you and to my church family that this story is knee-buckling. I do not understand the bravery and the faith of Jonathan or his armor-bearer. But Father, I want to have this kind of bravery and courage in my life and in my zeal to pursue you. And Father, I pray this for each of us in this room. Father, let this be a night that marks a turning point in our walks with you, where we take a step towards bravery, we take a step towards courage, we take a step in faith that we have not taken before in our lives, that we trust you more deeply and we are more committed to you after we have understood your response to this young armor-bearer and to Jonathan. Father, please help me to articulate your word. Help us to understand you and your word better because we've met together tonight. In your son's name we come to you. Amen. All right, so who are the characters of our story? Well, first of all, we have a man. He is named Saul. He is a king, and unfortunately in this story, he's not so awesome. King Saul started off very well and began almost immediately on a downward spiral. And in chapters 13, 14, and 15 of 1 Samuel, it's just really not going well for King Saul. That's actually an amazing study in and of itself. That's not the focus of our study tonight, so we're just going to barely touch on that. The second character that we have is Saul, King Saul's son. Actually, the rightful heir to the throne, but he doesn't want it, because he knows who David is, and he knows that David is the anointed one. Unbelievably humble. Jonathan is a character in the Bible worthy of very, very in-depth study. Jonathan has insight. Jonathan seems to see what God is doing in ways that no one, including his father, the anointed king, could see. Jonathan saw God moving and what God had in mind before others, and he had courage and obedience. He is an incredible example. I love this character, Jonathan. But again, he's not actually the focus of our story tonight. We're going to focus on a young servant, Jonathan's armor-bearer. We don't even know his name. He's a young man, but his response is incredible. He's a soldier, but he's actually a soldier without any weapons. That's going to become significant in a moment. He is the hero of the story. There are some other characters as well. We have the Philistines. They like to speak, but they don't have a lot to say. All right, they're not so awesome, and so we're going to give them a frowny face. The final character in our story in verse 23, this is a character, I was going to not use any symbol at all, but then I thought, okay, he is the Alpha and Omega, he is infinite, and so we can use the symbol for infinity. This is the Lord. In all of our stories, the Lord is present, but actually in this story, he's named as the main character. In verse 23, the author, Samuel, tells us, actually, this is all God. This doesn't have anything to do with Jonathan or Jonathan's armor-bearer. We can be amazed by these men and their bravery, but actually it was all God's doing. And so we can't forget that. The Lord is the one that gets the trophy. He's the hero. Obviously, he's a good guy. Okay, but I just wanted to make sure we were all crystal clear on that. All right? So here we go. These are the characters. How does this turn out? Well, it starts off in verse 1. The story goes, Jonathan says to his armor bearer, let's go pick a fight. All right, now there's a long story before this. The Israelites were supposed to be fighting a battle. So Jonathan, but they're not at this moment. So Jonathan says to his armor bearer, all right, let's go do it. Let's go pick a fight. Now, verse 6, if you remember verse 6, Jonathan says this, come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. He's basically, this is a derogatory term. He's saying, let's go attack these bozos. Let's go get these yahoos. Okay, he's not speaking highly of these guys. But look at the next phrase. I don't know what Bible you're reading. I don't know what version. I don't know what language. You do not need to know Hebrew. You do not need to know Aramaic. You don't need to know Greek or Spanish or German or Russian. It doesn't matter. All of our Bible versions are going to say almost the exact same thing. Your Bible may say, it may be. Your Bible may say, perhaps. Every version, it all means, I don't know. Jonathan has no idea how this is going to turn out. He is literally saying, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe God's going to help us. That's his faith statement. And his argument to his armor bearer is, we could have 600,000 soldiers, and we could have one. The number doesn't matter to God. And in that, he is absolutely theologically correct. And we need to remember that. James said that earlier tonight. God is the one that's in control. We need to pray for our leader, but if it's someone we don't know, if it's Biden, if it's Trump, they're in God's hands. It doesn't matter if there's one, it doesn't matter if there's a million. God, that doesn't affect God's strength. He's in control, and Jonathan knows this. All right, so he says, maybe God will do something. Okay, so here's the verse. Here's the key verse of all of it. So what does his armor bearer say to him, this young man? He says, do all that is in your heart. I am with you. His armor bearer says, let's go for it. Now, at this moment, what we need to understand is it would have been completely logical. Jonathan is saying, I have no idea what God's going to do. Maybe he'll work. Let's go attack an outpost. Let's go attack this garrison. At this point, it would have made sense for the young armor bearer to say, you know what? I'm a soldier, and the king is over there sitting under a tree, and I'm going to go see if he needs any more ice cubes for his tea. Maybe someone's going to shoot a flaming arrow, and I'll save him, and I can get another stripe on my. It would have been very easy for him to make any number of excuses that would have been completely valid, because Jonathan's plan is crazy. It actually gets worse before it gets better. But that's not this young man's response. This young man says to him, I'm all in. He's saying to him, heart and soul, what you want to do, I am following you. He saw in Jonathan a trustworthy leader. Jonathan had earned his respect, and he says, I'm with you. If you believe that's what God wants us to do, I am all in. Okay, he made a choice who he was going to follow. Now, at this moment, we have to acknowledge it looks like he's following him to certain death. That is the logical outcome at this moment, okay? But it gets worse. Jonathan's plan is, all right, we have these two cliffs. There's an army outpost at the top of the cliff. Let's walk down in between the two cliffs out in the open so that the soldiers can see us. If they say, you guys stay put right there, then we'll stay put. If they say, come on up here, we'd like to talk to you, then we'll climb up, because that's the symbol that God's going to give us victory. We have no idea why Jonathan thought that was God's symbol. There's no indication in the text that God whispered, okay, here's what I want you to do. And again, at this point, I would have been saying, if I'm the armor bearer, okay, wait a minute, let me understand this plan. We're down at the bottom of the cliff, out in the open, and if they say stand still, we're just going to stand still? We're going to wait for them to come down and kill? Is that really the best plan? I mean, I know you're a military leader, but have we thought this all the way through? He doesn't do that. This is a cliff. They're climbing up. It says hands and knees. They are literally, and I'm going to show you a picture, they are literally needing to rock climb. If you are climbing up a rock, are you holding any weapon that you have? No, Jonathan's sword is on his back. They need their hands and feet to climb. It would have literally, I'm not making this up, the guys at the top, they could have been going, where's a watermelon? This could be fun. They could have thrown mangoes, bananas, whatever they wanted at them. The guys climbing up were helpless. They could have gotten a big boulder. Hey, let's go bowling. Right? The strategy is nuts. Jonathan's armor bearer is with him. Let's do it. I'm all in. Well, they get to the top and they kill 20 people. Now, chapter 13, verse 22 tells us the Israelite army was in so much trouble at this point, they had 2 swords. Saul had one and Jonathan had one. That meant the armor bearer probably only had Jonathan's shield. I don't know how they killed 20 armed soldiers. I would love to have seen how that happened. Did the armor bearer just punch someone and then take their sword and start? I don't know what happened. But they're climbing up. They kill 20 people. They start this rout. The whole Philistine army flees. The Israelite army is energized. People that had been hiding, that had actually fled the army, they join again and they chase the Philistines out. And verse 23 tells us God saved Israel that day. So I told you I would show you some pictures. This is an artist's rendering of a gorge near Michmash. And I wasn't kidding. This is a serious climb. The guys at the top of the hill had every military advantage possible. There's no way that Jonathan's plan should have worked. And that's important. Because God was at work. It wasn't Jonathan or his armor bearer. Now, this is a little bit smaller, but you can see Saul is up at Migron. Jonathan's a little bit lower. He goes out, and he has to cross this ravine and get up to the Philistine outpost at the top. They flee, and they run right into Saul's forces, and it's a major, major victory. And I just wanted to show this. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 14. If you turn to the right a few pages, you get to 1 Samuel 17. That's a very famous story of David and Goliath. This is the time period of David and Goliath. And I wanted you to show a picture. This is what we're looking at with the weaponry. The Philistines had complete control over all the metalworks. The Israelites, even for their farm implements, their axes, their plows, they had to take everything to the Philistines to get their stuff sharpened. The Philistines had a complete stranglehold on all the metal. And so they had actually limited the Israelites down to 2 swords. They had all the chariots, they had all the weapons, and so you've got these shepherds, you've got these people trying to attack with slings and clubs and rocks, and they're going against guys in full armor with swords. The battle was not even. Okay, it gets worse. In chapters 11 through 13, if you have the time to read the greater context, the author is actually showing us, in chapter 11, the Israelite army had 330,000 soldiers. That's an enormous army. Okay, even by today's standards, that would rank in the top 10 in the world. 330,000 foot soldiers is a huge army. But you get to chapter 13, verse 15, so many had fled, it was down to 600. And in chapter 14, verse 1, only 2 of them are willing to fight, Jonathan and his armor bearer. Okay, there's a reason for this. If you look at the Philistine troops, they have 3,000 chariots. So in a chariot, you have the driver, and then you've got a guy with a bow and arrow or a huge sword. So you have 2 people in every chariot. There are so many soldiers, they said they're like the sand. They couldn't even count all the soldiers. The point is this. The contrast is immense on purpose. Israel was not in a place to win the war, but it wasn't about them, and it wasn't about their military strength. It was about God. They have 2 weapons. The Philistines, it's innumerable, their weapons. Now, I want to draw our attention to the leadership. Saul was God's king. Saul was supposed to be leading the nation of Israel to attack the Philistines and to get them out because they were not obeying or pursuing God. But in this, do you remember verse 2? Saul is sitting under a tree. And this is a study for another day, but Samuel is intentionally, throughout these chapters, he's intentionally showing us contrast between who Jonathan and his relationship with God and Saul and his relationship with God. At this time, the Philistines are sending out raiding parties, and they're attacking the Israelites, and they're a complete nuisance to the Israelite nation. Let me show you just a contrast between Saul and Jonathan. Jonathan is obeying, Saul is disobeying. In chapter 13, that's where he's supposed to wait for Samuel, and he doesn't wait. He offers a sacrifice on his own. In chapter 14, he makes a rash vow that he never should have made. In chapter 15, we're told that Saul was supposed to wipe out the Amalekites. He didn't do it. He kept King Agag alive. He kept the best of the animals. He's just disobeying. Meanwhile, Jonathan, he's trying to obey. You have Jonathan being brave. All right, let's go. Let's attack, even if there's only two of us. Saul's cowardly. He's waiting. He's refusing to engage, even though God has told them to go. Jonathan's relying on God. There's no way that this battle plan is going to work unless God does it. Saul is relying on himself. Well, let's figure this out. How can I get more troops? How can I arrange this? Jonathan is decisive. Saul's erratic. Well, let's wait. Oh, no, let's attack now. Oh, let's wait. This whole time he's back and forth. And the author is intentionally showing us Jonathan is an example of someone who's willing to trust God no matter the odds and to risk. Saul is not obeying God. All right? So, what are some lessons that we can learn? The first lesson is this, I believe. It is all about God's glory. There's no way to read this story and to see Jonathan. Jonathan was a good soldier. Jonathan was a brave warrior. This story has nothing to do with great military strategy. It has nothing to do with fantastic weaponry. This story is all about God saying, I'm going to do something, and I'm going to show you that I can do something with absolutely nothing. They're going to climb up a cliff, and they're going to rout. And actually, in verse 15, it says, a very great trembling. It's a really hard phrase to translate. That phrase is actually an Elohim earthquake. It actually means God is causing the quake. The author is trying to tell us over and over again, this is God doing this. It's for his glory. He wants everyone to read this story and go, wow, God's in control if we'll just obey and trust him. Okay, so here's my question in this. Jonathan got it. The author doesn't tell us how Jonathan knew, but Jonathan got it, Saul missed it. Let me fast forward this to a scenario in 2020. God had told Jonathan, he told Saul, he told Israel, you all need, if these people will not bow their knee to me, if they will not worship me, you need to push them out of the land because they're going to draw your hearts away from me. You need to rid the land of these people that will not worship me. If they will worship me, okay. If they won't worship me, out they go. It was a very simple command. Israel was struggling to obey. Joshua led well, didn't go so well after he died. Jonathan got it. Jonathan was trying to obey. So let's fast forward to today. God is crystal clear with a number of commands that somehow we still struggle with today. All right, I want to give one example. God is crystal clear. Do you know 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3? It is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid, anyone know what comes next? Sexual immorality. I'll say it again. It is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body. If you are not sure about God's standard for purity, I would love to spend some time with you after. I will stay up here after the service. I have a meeting. They can start without me. Let's talk about God's standard for purity. It is very clear. Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 5, verse 27, that you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But Jesus took it a step further in verse 28, didn't he? He says, I tell you that anyone that looks at a woman with lust in his heart has committed adultery with her already in his heart. Looking lustfully is adultery. Pornography is wrong. God's standard for purity is crystal clear. Before marriage, we are to remain pure. We don't think about sex in the wrong way. We don't touch people. We keep ourselves pure before marriage. Once we're married, then we stay pure with that person. We don't think about other people in bad ways. We don't touch anyone else. We don't go there with our minds. We don't go there with our emotions. Before marriage, we're pure. We reserve ourselves for that spouse, if God gives us a spouse. During marriage, we stay pure with that spouse. It's not confusing. It's crystal clear. And so let's apply this to the story now. Nowadays, I'm sure if you're in school, if you're at work, there's lots of people that don't believe this. There's lots of people that think that this is old-fashioned or crazy. It actually takes courage. You might be with a group of friends. They want to look at something that's impure. You know it's going to take your mind and your heart in the wrong direction. I know because it happened to me. It takes courage to say, guys, I can't do that. I'm out. It takes courage to stand up and say, that's disgusting. We're not going to do that. That's degrading to women. That takes amazing courage. But that's obedience. That's courage. That's saying, you know what? I'm not going to worry about the outcome. God's glory is more important than my reputation. Maybe God is going to spare me the embarrassment. Maybe he won't. But his glory is what matters. And he has said purity matters. God is holy and he is pure, and I want to obey him, so I'm going to be pure. Does that make sense? And that's just one. There are so many where God's been crystal clear. The question is, will we risk being ashamed? Will we risk embarrassment? Will we risk looking like a fool around others? Will we take his standard and say, I'm completely committed. I'm all in. I don't care about the fallout. His glory is more important than my reputation. Oh my goodness, I did not look at the clock. I'm so sorry. Well, let me get these other two quickly. Risking for the right cause invites God's blessing. When we step out and we say, I'm going to obey. Jonathan wasn't just taking foolish risk. Jonathan was seeking to obey God's command of, you need to rid the land of those who will worship other idols. Jonathan was trying to obey. So when we risk for the right cause, we invite God's blessing into our lives. And who we are following matters. It goes back to, who are you following on YouTube? Are they pushing you towards purity? Are they pushing you towards risking? Here's some questions for you to think about at the very end. Who am I following? Are they more concerned with God's glory, or are they more concerned with the number of followers that they have? Do they want their own personal fame? Are they more concerned with obeying God, or are they more concerned with earthly or financial success? I'm being serious about this. Who are you following right now? Who am I following? Who are the people that I think I need to be listening to them? Are they more concerned with obeying God and with God's glory, or are they more concerned with their own popularity and how many people they have clicking on their videos? How many people they have in their email pool? Are they pushing me to risk, to boldly obey God? I want to invite you tonight. I'm going to close in prayer. I want to invite you to close your eyes and to bow your heads. And I want to invite you to ask God a dangerous prayer. And the prayer that I want to invite you to pray is, God, are there areas of my life that I've been ashamed or scared to obey you? Will you ask God to show you areas of your life that you've not been willing to be all in and just say, no matter the outcome, I'm going to obey. I'm going to do the right thing? Are you willing to give up pleasures? Seems like a good thing right now, feels good in the moment, but you know it's disobeying God. Are you willing to give that up for His glory? Father, I thank you so much for this young armor bearer and his willingness to trust a godly leader. And Father, I thank you that you've given me godly leaders that I could follow. I ask you for each of us tonight. I ask you to help me to be honest where I've allowed sin to creep in and I'm struggling obeying you fully. Father, please help us to be willing to risk personal shame or embarrassment, but to boldly follow you and to stand up for the truth of your word for your glory. Father, help us to be more about your glory than our own glory. Thank you, Father. Thank you for your word. And it's in your Son's name we come to you. Amen.